Welcome, Tiny Hands, Big Dreams, here on the off-grid homestead in southern Ecuador. We have an interesting conversation about off-grid sustainability and specifically backups. Making your lifestyle that is resilient to interruptions, problems, preventing loss of life or happiness. Or
Well, that is the entire point of most people going off-grid or being self-sufficient, is to be just that, to not rely on other people, larger systems.
But there are some real threats to that lifestyle that will crop up whether you thought about them or not, that can throw a giant wrench into things, like catastrophically even. So we're going to touch on the major systems
We've got like three main points.
Right. Three main points, which is food, power, water. And pretty much everything else is sort of an easy, like, oh, what if I break a shovel? Have a second shovel. Right? So like that, we've broken a lot of shovels.
Or learn how to fix a or learn how to fix a shovel is an even better. Learning how to do you want to talk about your pants? Learning how to fix things.
Learning how to fix and mend things, regardless of what it is. Sometimes, and you're like, well, it's not economic. Well, I'll just buy a new one. You have to get out of that mind frame of like, well, yes, I could spend 3 hours on this thing, or I could buy another one for $10. But the mentality that you have to sort of take on is, I just need to be able to repair the thing, to keep it going. You know, calamities happen. People get snowed in, roads washed away. Hurricane Helene. My gosh, we were still hearing about people that after a month, finally somebody made it up to their place. They're like, yeah, you're the first person we've seen. We've just been all holed up here in our property.
Yeah.
Proper, you're set up in the mountains there. Nice. Stuff happens. There's lots of stuff out there, from economic to political, weather, volcano.
Or even just as simple as a drought.
Sure.
We've been experiencing, I mean, not we so much, but Ecuador in general has been experiencing a drought, and it's affecting things.
And very suddenly, a diesel drought, which we did a short on. There's crazy diesel shortages. Not so much at the port. They said there's plenty of diesel, but there's a trucking problem. There's a pipeline problem simultaneously. It's sort of unclear as to exactly what's going on.
Or why.
But trucks are lined up around the gas stations waiting.
Yeah. Who knows how long.
Like piranha staring up at a hunk of meat above their tank. Yeah.
Hungry trucks.
Hungry.
Do you want to start with power?
Let's start with power. We are totally off-grid with solar. Now, it's a beautiful sunny day. It has been gorgeous all day. I was watching our power. There's a graph that I have that goes by the hour, and it comes on, and I have our panels angled to get a longer span of where they absorb power rather than simply the middle of the day. So it comes on and the graph just goes up and peaks out and just holds all day. We get like 8 hours of just sucking it up. Now, behind the camera that you can't see is the glorious smell of fresh, delicious pineapple right from a field to us, dehydrating. Smell-o-vision doesn't work. I wish it did. Yeah, they were literally... They had one little short couple-hour truck ride to the market. We bought them, boom, immediately cut up in the dehydrator. Pineapple. So beautiful sunny day. We have power to spare. No problems there. Not all days are like that. And that's where you get into solar is not 100% reliable. No one source of energy is 100% reliable. Hydro is not 100%. A generator is not 100%. The power company is not 100%.
Because wherever they get their power from is not 100%.
Things happen. Distribution problems happen. Equipment failures happen. Storms happen.
Droughts happen.
Ecuador is having a massive drought. Huge power cuts. 6, 7, 12, 14 hours a day at its worst. 14 hours a day in like 2 chunks where they just chop the power of whole towns. Okay, sorry we had to deal with a goat emergency.
Fuck being stupid.
Power cuts, up to like 14 hours a day. People basically just sucked it up and just went, no power. Now, not everybody. The common answer was a generator, usually a crappy one. There's 2 classes. There's little crappy generators that just sort of like rattle away out. They just put them out on the sidewalk, run a cord in the door. Or if you're like a bigger thing, there was a seamstress place, there was a couple other places, big diesel generator. I'm like, whoa, you spent money there.
Which was all well and good until there's now like not diesel.
Yeah, like it's a legitimate backup for the small amount of time that you use it. It's good. Now, if that time is not very small, the price gets really ugly.
You are also still reliant on gas, diesel,
something,
which costs money and is then something you are relying on from out in the world.
And like right now, there's no diesel, and when it shows up, those trucks are first. Trust me, they're not going to let you in there with your gas cans. So right now, diesel's hard to come by. My buddy in the south has a problem getting gas for his generator because he's too close to the border, and there's a law against selling to foreigners gas. He has to send an Ecuadorian. But that's just here. Redundancy in collection. Now, in the future, I have a design that I wanted to come out with. It's a bit of an odd thing, but for Pico Hydro, we have a very small water source. I might be able to chase it up to get a higher pressure. I might be able to take a tube further down our hill to get even more pressure again, and have a very small, I'm hoping for 200 watt hydro. Now, doesn't seem like much, but it's 24 hours. So 200 watts times 24 gets you 4.8 kilowatts. Well, that's significant. That's half of our daily usage, in fact. Guess what? If that's half our daily usage, our batteries drain, if there's zero sun, half as fast. Gets us much further. Probably if we did that, that is a complete redundancy. Unless we have
the solar, it would just augment.
Right, unless we have a total failure of, say, the inverter, in which case the backup again is the generator, which is a separate system. So that's our power plan. Water. Our water in the dry season
has gotten a little lower than we're comfy with.
Yeah, no, it was that when we moved here. When we first moved here, and I had asked the guy, I'm like, does it ever go dry? He goes, never goes dry. Like,
that's true. It has never gone dry.
It's never gone dry, but it's gotten down to a half-inch hose is the entire flow.
Which is, it's enough, but...
Again, at any one moment, it's barely enough, but if you have a reservoir and you let it slowly fill, and then you use the hose, use a thing, use something else, all of a sudden, that's actually quite a lot if you have storage. Storage is kind of the answer to most of these things, but not all.
Right now we have no storage for water.
Yeah, we have a 20-gallon tub, but the water flows into the tub, swirls, and then overflows. So if we start using a lot of water, we have that buffer of 20 gallons, and we can march that tub down.
We have, when it was very dry not that long ago, we have actually emptied that, then had to wait for it to refill. Now that's not a big deal, but it does call into question our system if it continued to get drier. It has since rained and we're okay. But that doesn't mean it's always going to happen. And it definitely made us go back to, maybe we need a storage of water.
So we looked at, for our water at least, we came up with a plan of we're going to at some point, which we don't have right now, we're going to build a very large tank up the hill that our little 20-gallon reserve overflows into. And then it itself also overflows. So when there's surplus water, that tank fills and it also overflows, stays fresh.
Now we could also, I had the idea of overflowing the large tank actually into the pond we want to create.
Right. We can take that output.
So where it's not even.
So yeah, once the first need is satisfied, the second need is satisfied, that water then comes down to the pond. Now, it is way up the mountain, what happens, and we see a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, this and that, well, the tank of water is empty. It doesn't do you a lot of good to have a gianty tank of water that is being filled and you're draining out the bottom, because the first thing that you realize is the water pressure is low, and then you go up there and the tank's empty.
And then you don't have a reserve, and you didn't know you were out of water, and you should have.
So do you have some sort of audible or electronic notification of low level? Now, that's commonplace in an industrial system. I used to build them. I used to do industrial automation. But
that's not going to help us.
Technological answers are not what we're after. We're after simple and reliable. So we're going to put a valve on the big tank that wise into our feed that comes down. If the water system goes dry, if there is just so little flow that we've drained the bucket, or for whatever reason it stops, water stops, that is our indicator, and we go up the hill and we're like, we can open our gianty tank, but we know that we are on a very much finite basis.
We are not using the water out of the tank. So the only thing that goes into the pond then would be the overflow of the giant tank. So we would always have at least that much water.
Which would actually be our first indication, is if the pond stops flowing.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to.
So as long as it's on and off, like normal.
And then if we're like, the pond isn't filling, well, that's a good note that maybe something has gone wrong. And then if our water stops or slows, we know we have the reserve.
Yeah.
And then we ration the reserve.
1,000 gallons or something, whatever size tank we put up there. So that would be a redundant system for water. It is only, again, for a length of time. We could not survive forever. It is.
Now, that would also mean that we would have a pond.
Yep.
That would be a reserve for non-potable water, which is something.
It is. It'll keep plants alive.
Yeah, and we could, again, this is all like if we needed to, we could filter it.
We could.
Now, we want to. We don't need to, but we could.
We could.
So that is like a backup to the backup.
There's also a stream that is below our property that drains from multiple valleys that is far more robust and large. But it's
down there
150 feet vertically down.
So
which is
there.
A significant little pump and a lot of piping and energy, and
yeah,
it's there though. You just gotta get to it.
Part of and I think it's important because I see a lot of people who have the giant tank of water that just sits there and sits there and sits there. That's what I always do. It's icky. I know what happens to water that sits around here. It does not stay clear. Turns colors. So that's part of like our plan, is that it will be flowing through the tank.
Moving water is always best.
Until it no longer has enough to overflow. That
does mean we do get a bit of sediment that builds up in the bottom. And every so often it's good to go and clean it out. Mostly it's clay residue, is most of what we get in there. Clay gets suspended in the water. Gets carried in.
It's an easy way to keep it moving.
Keeping a tank stirred, keeping it bubbled is great. But again, energy.
So we're doing it all in a very
natural way. The water comes down the hill, the water stirs the tank.
Food.
Water. Yeah.
Food is next.
Food.
Now, to me, the power and water are relatively simple. Perhaps not simple to execute, but cut and dry. You need to have a backup of it. You need to have another way to create it or capture it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Food is a little bit more complicated.
It is.
But very critical.
It is very critical.
One would say more critical than power.
And your systems interlink. So we were talking earlier. One of the things we brought with us for our grand adventure was a manual meat grinder, because if there's no power and we have to live without power, then we have to have a manual meat grinder. And this was our thinking. We bought a beautiful stainless steel, because stainless steel's forever. Beautiful stainless steel meat grinder. And then we realized,
manual meat grinder.
If we have no power,
is our priority grinding meat? Are we going to be able to refrigerate or freeze said meat? Why did we think this? I'm not sure our thought on that.
Like, if we have meat, we're going to have to eat it immediately.
I could just chop it up.
You could just chop
Like,
it up.
I don't.
For the pound or two that it is.
I don't know why.
Or we just eat it in chunks, like, and survive.
I don't know why we thought that.
We
was
will
important.
probably never use it.
We could probably sell it to someone here.
It's probably worth a ton here. You can't get them. Refrigeration, it turns out, is a much bigger concern. Runs on electricity. We now have a critical system that runs off a separate critical system.
Yep.
All of it with many, many parts.
Yes.
So the reliability is the sum of all of the failure rates of all of the pieces of all of the equipment stuck together.
Yep.
If we run out of refrigeration, we are in a world of hurt, because that includes our deep freezer.
Yes.
Now,
which hurts us.
Talking to my local friend Jorge, he goes, "Oh, if my wife needs chicken for dinner, she goes to the butcher, she buys 2 pounds of chicken, she makes it for dinner. She needs it for lunch, she goes and buys it for lunch." Like, it is a just-in-time inventory, and this is fairly normal here. People don't they don't preserve foods. They don't really stockpile much. Why would you? You just go get it fresh year round.
Which, I mean, it usually works for people.
It works until it doesn't.
Yes. And it makes you reliant on other people. That goes all the way back to wherever a butcher is getting that meat.
You mean with a truck that uses diesel? And you begin to see that the sabotage of the system.
Yep. So
one little thing breaks down, and all of a sudden, an entire chain of events starts to unfold. Of oh, suck.
So our entire plan's goal, life, is based around not being affected by that stuff. Honestly.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people are like, well, you can't really be self-sufficient on your own. You can. We can. Maybe not everyone can. Maybe not everyone can comfortably.
Not instantaneously.
We're not. Well, that's the thing. It takes time. We're not talking about this from a place of we have done all of these things and we are absolutely perfectly set up.
No.
We're not.
We are diligently working towards it.
But it takes time.
And making progress towards it.
It takes a lot of time.
It's like building soil.
Yeah.
Every time we plant stuff, it gets better and takes longer to die.
It's true. It is. It's better
right
every
now,
time.
Maybe I'll get you a picture here at the end of the video. Our beans are recovering from the grand snail and rat adventure. The tomatoes are actually doing good. The peppers are continuing to grow. So here's the thing about...
The garlic came up.
Yeah, the garlic came up. If you get peppers to a certain size here, and they get woody and resilient, they just keep going. They turn into trees. Like, they just... When people go out and they just start picking peppers by the 100 off one plant, especially the little hot ones, and you'll see them around where people just have this bush. They're like, it's 10 feet tall, 6 feet across, and has so many red peppers you could mace an army. Yeah, it's not a seasonal thing. It just grows. Anyway, it takes time to build the soil. You just have to be patient.
So a couple of the things, the backups when it comes to food. Raising, growing food. And then we'll get into the keeping and the cooking, because that's also important. I was thinking about this as I traipsed around our pig fences. While I love our pigs, I don't think you should have just pigs or just cows or just anything as your meat source. Because what if something happens to them all? Diseases happen.
And they tend to run through one herd. Yeah, one species. Sometimes
they cross. They rarely cross, especially if you have pigs. Pigs and ruminants don't really cross diseases often. But I had that realization of having multiple...
Pineapple.
Having multiple... For us, meat is super critical. So having multiple meat animals means that you are unlikely to lose all of them to something.
You could survive without a lot of things. If you have water and meat, you're going to make it pretty far.
It's true. So for us, that means the eventual plan is to have pigs and sheep as the meat animals. which means that we lost her for a minute. I lost
Let me detour.
memories.
My lovely wife and her culinary prowess came to us and something like we got a sheep and she's like she's gonna use like every part of it and she's like, you ever had sheep neck? And I was aghast and a horror. I'm like, oh, that sounds horrible and gross. It's like just picking up a chunk of something out of the garbage and be like, hey, let's eat this part. I'm like, I don't know what I thought. I've never it just had it in a negative connotation. And what did you make with that?
Oh, I don't remember. Some sort of slow cooked, like braised in a sauce with a flatbread thing. I don't remember.
It was the most tender, flavorful, succulent, juicy, umami. We both, the kid and I both talk about it like, oh, are you going to make sheep neck again? It's like our favorite part of the sheep.
There's only one, though.
I know.
So cheap.
They are really tasty when done right. Sorry. Your bonus, like, for the day.
So sheep.
Sheep.
Sheep and pigs. Now, for some people, it might be cows. It might be, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you like, whatever works on your property.
Sure.
But I think having multiple meat animals is important.
Yeah. A roving gang of chickens.
And ducks.
And ducks.
Because sometimes something happens to one or the other.
Yeah. We had a deficiency problem and just problems because of one little mineral that we had to solve. But it sort of damaged those animals.
Yep.
Like,
yeah.
Did it affect the pigs? No. No, it did not.
Pigs were just fine.
Yeah.
And the same with crops. While we don't put as much emphasis on the vegetables in like super necessary diet, if you look at the starches, the filling starches.
Yeah.
We don't just grow potatoes. We don't just grow sweet potatoes because sometimes something happens to one of them. Sometimes a pest comes. Sometimes a disease. Sometimes.
And it takes out
something
a bunch of one thing. So when you look at things from a nutritional basis of this is a calorie starch thing, or this is a a vitamin C thing, this is a and having multiple different things in the nutritional categories in case of failure.
So like potatoes, sweet potatoes, and yucca.
Yeah.
So one of those will work.
Yeah.
One of them will likely fail.
Yucca is maybe my least favorite, just on a.
But it is the easiest to grow.
On a taste basis, but my gosh.
Yes.
A literal toddler could grow yucca.
Which means that.
And then a year later, the toddler could dig it up with their plastic shovel. Now they couldn't cook it, but you get my point. It'd actually be a great project for kids.
It's true. So that's just my thought on the actual growing and raising. Is having backup crops and animals, which sounds weird, but it is. It's a fact. The other thing we were talking about was, and not everyone will agree with this, if you are raising animals self-sufficiently, you are likely going to have breeding pairs. Which is kind of annoying sometimes because you have the boy around for one reason, otherwise they're just a pain typically. I mean, our giant boar is just a pain sometimes.
5 minutes every 7 months.
And he's just a giant slobbering beast.
He's a 500-pound slobbering, grunting beast that destroys fences and splatters mud at you the rest of the time.
But makes good bacon seeds.
Makes good bacon seeds.
So, some people are like, well, why don't you AI? We've gotten this question a bunch of times. Well, how do I put this nicely? Our sow is not one that I would enjoy. I don't want to do that.
You have to have her contained in a cage, and then she's going to eat you.
Boy, I don't want
She's a lovely pig right now. She's laying out. She's basking in the sun. She's super preggers. She's like 2 weeks away. Yeah. And you can pet her now, and she's all happy. She has her own space. She doesn't like being around other, she just wants her own damn space. And she's lovely and docile. She doesn't mess with her fence. She doesn't tear up her water line. Well, she doesn't even argue over the food dish. And she goes over to feed her. She goes, "Oh, you want some food?" And she walks over and she waits. And Doesn't even take the dish in and out. Just puts the food in the dish. She waits nicely and she eats. Doesn't scarf it like the giant boar who just stuffs his face downward and the food pushes into his throat and then he closes. Kind of like a giant like excavator with like the closable bucket.
A little bit. Where were you going with that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, lovely pig.
Lovely pig. But I'm not going to AI her. That's where we were at. No.
Yeah, it's probably not possible in our free range setup. There is places that do it here. It's actually common.
This is a bit of a tangent. I don't think that AI is a super stellar idea. I have some issues with it. I think that there's, and there was talk about this in like the goat world, that
It's just one bug.
That there's actually the potential that there isn't enough genetic diversity in goats in the United States anymore, which I've been saying for a long time, because they've all come from like just a few, and there just isn't enough diversity. Now we are breeding crossbred mutts of animals for honestly the best end result possible.
Yeah.
You can't do that in AI. With AI.
Yeah, we've got
you have like
something mini Nubian, something mini Saanen, and something fuzzy Peruvian goat.
I don't think something fuzzy Peruvian goat.
That's all we know about him.
Is something that you can get through AI.
But he makes really cute babies.
Now, our pigs again are not specific breeds, and I don't want them to be. I like what they are, and we're having really good results from that. AI pushes you into like.
Funny side note, I met a guy at a meeting last week who runs an experimental research station funded by like the government and a university not far from here. And we started talking about animals and things. Oh, he's got animals on the site, like, oh, kind of, we were talking about solar. He's going to have that there. And then talking about animals. And he's like, oh, I'm doing crosses. I'm like, what are you doing crosses of? He's like, oh, I'm doing of the boars, more commercial kind of meat pigs, Duroc, and then Criollo mothers. And I went, that's sort of what we're doing too. And we both pull out pictures, and we both have identical looking Criollo, which means natural
like
heritage kind of mothers. The pigs look the same. Like we picked kind of the same mother. And then we looked at the fathers, and his are they're just straight Duroc, and ours is already a cross.
But leans that direction.
I very much, and for the exact same reasons we came to, it's just a much better carcass. It's better growth rates. It fixes the problems of the genetics have sort of wandered too far in each direction, and it brings them back.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really funny. So
while
we're not crazy.
While AI might be easier in some ways, I don't think it's really the best option. It certainly isn't for us. So if you're going, and then again, you're still reliant on someone else.
Yeah.
Always. So if you're going to breed your own animals and you're going to keep boys, ideally, I think you should have multiple. I say that because we have, we've lost our buck before with our goats, and we were in a position of not only incredibly sad, but also
we were just
our goat system stops.
We were just about to rebreed the goats.
It is just a full stop.
And it was a freak accident, and he died.
And then there's a stop to your entire system. You're done until you can replace that animal. Is it great to keep extra animals? And how did you put this? You put this really well earlier about.
It is most efficient. It is most economical to have like 0 or 1 of the male creature for your herd. So yes, artificial insemination has a cost, but it is less than keeping the male for the length of time in betweens when you need him, the space, the things, the food, all the stuff. Okay, so cheapest is no male, but you have to have something. So artificial insemination comes in. Then if you don't want to go that, you keep 1 male, which has a cost divided over how many sows you have. And right now we only have 1. So it's
or,
not.
Or with goats, it would
Yeah,
be
with goats.
multiple.
With goats, it's the small herd, but you don't have resiliency in case of some sort of accident, which is exactly what we had. We had one buck. Something happens to that one, the whole system stops. Now we could have lost a female goat to some calamity. It wouldn't have stopped the program. Sad, unfortunate, but it wouldn't have stopped the program. So now you're like, well, you really need redundancy of each component, which is having 2 bucks. No, it is not as efficient, but you have to become sometimes inefficient for true resiliency to calamity. If it's important, if it's just a side hobby and a thing and you could always just get another one, meh. But when you're out in the middle of nowhere like us and you're trying to be totally self-sufficient and oh my gosh, the whole aliens could invade tomorrow. They might invade tomorrow, 3rd of December. It could happen. And then suddenly the world goes crazy and where's yeah, you still need to eat. You still, or there's no diesel to get the things, this, that, and you still. So true resiliency is less efficient. It's more work. But you're not hamstrung at the wrong moment. It is less convenient.
Like ideally, we would have 2 more pigs, and that seems like a lot.
Yeah.
But it would mean that we would be pretty much guaranteed that we would have.
We could have 50 more pigs with Wilby.
Okay, that's true. We don't need that many though. But that is, I mean, there's a balance. I'm not sure we'll ever have 2 boars because it's just. But we are also aware that if we do not, we have put ourselves in a less resilient position.
It's true.
And sometimes you have to make that choice. You're not going to be perfectly resilient in every way because
it is for us infeasible right now to keep a second giant boar for 1 sow,
or even for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10.
Yeah, he's a cost.
He is a cost.
He's a costing. He drools a lot too. You go to walk up there with the food, and there's already a puddle of drool, and there's a trail of drool. Like, how much drool is in the pig?
He's disgusting. Well, we love him. Alright, so you have your food, you have your animals' food. What are you going to do with it?
With what?
The food.
Oh.
So,
right.
Right now we have a freezer and a refrigerator. As we talked about, without power, you are out of luck.
It's all going bad. So if you can't get another freezer, or if it has failed for some other reason, like your power system has quit, you have to resolve that issue. Or you can't have the things that rely on that system.
So we've been talking about a cold room for many, 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 many years.
Yeah.
You have promised me such a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna dig it into the earth, and I actually have an idea for a full water-powered refrigeration system. Runs off water, uses water. There's no refrigerants to speak of. There's no electronics. It is literally all water. It's a little bit Gilligan's Island, but I should be able to keep a cold room at about 50 degrees, maybe in the high 40s, year-round.
And that is in the tropics.
In this climate.
We're already at a warm temperature.
Without adding really anything else.
And without using power.
Without using power.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
And that gives us a huge backup plan for storage. Now that isn't, refrigerator storage, that isn't freezer storage, but that does allow us to hold much larger amounts of fruits and vegetables and grains and stuff like that.
Like a big walk-in room with shelves where, all right, here's a case in point. We have maracuja.
Passion fruit.
Passion fruit.
Which is actually producing.
Gosh, they're huge.
It's doing real good.
The gianty fruits that hang from the tree. Fine. All right. Juicy, succulent fruits.
You done?
But they only ripen a few at a time. We have, 15, 20 of them
Something like that.
And they spread out. Honestly, we could have spread them out 4 times as big. But every day the kid comes in with, here's another few. We're like, a batch, when we would buy a batch of these, is 100.
Like to make like a maracuja syrup.
Yeah.
We buy a bag of 100.
And a bag of 100 nets us some quarts.
About 10.
About 10 quarts of maracuja syrup, which we then put in a little squirty bottle, like a little ketchup squeezer, and with some fizzy water have delightful beverages. Works out pretty well. So we have the maracuja, but at 3 or 4 a day,
What's the day with that?
it doesn't, they're just not all ripening at once. Now, this may be the front end of like the harvest, and then we get like a surge of them.
Or this may just be the way that they are.
Because there's a slight bit of shading, and they're gonna spend months.
Who knows?
But we can't leave the fruit sitting around in our house, which is hot. It's hotter inside than outside. If we had a cold room, we could stockpile without the having to stuff our fridge full or using energy. Stockpile these until we could get a batch and then actually use. Yep. So that's our today example that we're stockpiling passion fruit. But it's just not a process of like to cut them open, to scrape them out, to Cuisinart them, to cook them down, to sugar them, to put them in jars, to screen them all, run them through a sieve. All of that also needs cleaned.
I'm not going to do that for 3 every day. You kidding me?
Right. It just becomes too much time.
It's just inefficient.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to make life harder for ourselves. We're actually trying to make life easier in the end.
Yeah.
We just have to put in so much of the upfront work. Someone on a Facebook group today was like talking about wanting to grow off grid, but had like these questions of like, well, what's your, what life or what health insurance do you have, and what's your retirement plan? And I'm looking around, I'm like, I said, well, health insurance is a healthy lifestyle, and my retirement plan is a porch.
Yeah, that's about right.
There you go. That's our plan. We just have to put in the work.
You're gonna live a super stressed out, crappy life, eating crappy food, and then
so you can
hope
retire?
that some HMO organization is going to make the best choices to prolong your life after you've done a bunch of damage to your body.
So we are putting in tons of work now, so that when we are older, we can honestly just not have to do that much work.
Yeah.
Life will just
house will be built, things will work, systems operate. There's of course maintenance on all of it.
It will be so much less than in the building phase.
Yes.
So the last point that we wanted to talk about was cooking, because the food must be cooked.
Yeah.
I am not going to have a raw diet. Sorry. If you eat raw yucca, you might die.
You might die. There's there exists a lot of food, bugs and things. You don't want to eat those. Meat, again, not advisable. Raw pork will kill you.
So we like to cook our food.
Yeah. So right now we buy gas.
Propane.
It is really, really cheap. It's a few dollars for a 40-pound tank, which is like a double barbecue size. It is the standard here in Ecuador. It is subsidized. I think you get 2 tanks a month at the $1.65. But in reality, if the truck drives around and sells it to you, it's like $3.25, $3.50. What is our backup? Well, we have a little induction cooktop, which is super efficient, but there's only one. Who knows how long it's going to last?
There's no oven.
There's no oven. And again, it's only one. She frequently has every burner on the stove going and the oven because she just loves emptying tanks of gas. I know. I love eating. Yes,
You see the correlation?
Yes.
Yes.
So what's our backup? Eventually, we're going to have ourselves a lovely, probably outdoor like grill, rocket stove, bread oven. I don't know, pizza oven.
You can have an outdoor kitchen.
Yeah.
Because you don't want that type of heat in a house here.
No.
You might in a colder climate.
Wood. A properly built little like wood rocket stove It's fairly efficient on wood. Makes a solid amount of heat. Takes a bit to get going. It's a bit fussier. You can't just turn it on and go.
No.
But
We have lots of wood.
Yeah. And it's actually really common here. People use charcoal a lot too. It's a little nicer, but it costs more.
You can also make your own charcoal.
You can. Our neighbor does it. Yeah. That's where a lot of people around here get it.
So that's kind of our intended backup. And honestly, like we were talking, like, yeah, you know what? A lot of the times, if something went really wrong, you just simply go without things. That's it.
Yeah.
You just don't have the conveniences, the luxuries, the things we're used to, and you just don't, and you're okay with it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not super okay with the idea of not having a hot shower. What's your backup plan for that?
It is really warm in the daytime that warms the hose laying on the ground.
I know, it was so hot when I was trying to water the pigs. It was like 10 minutes of hot water for a shower. I'm like, I'm just using this.
Because our terrain is so crazy and there's roots and things everywhere, basically run a water line somewhere. We just lay a piece of polyethylene tubing on the ground, which eventually the earth sort of
closes and
closes. It just becomes one. They disappear. But anywhere it is exposed, it is black tubing in the sun, and then you don't want to scald the pig.
And I thought about using that as a shower, but I like to shower not in the middle of the day.
Yeah, we would have to then store hot water. There is a long-term plan to rig up the rest of our solar panels and electrically dump them into a hot water tank. Yes, it will work. No, it's not going to make enough hot water. It'll be very limited just because we get on average if I look at our historical yearly average, we're supposed to get 4.5 hours of sun hours on a panel. I've extended it out to 8 with running them at different angles. But
there's a video on.
There's a video on. But I also then am using them. It's just spreading it out for different times a day, which does help us. But there's days where we just don't get enough sun. So our yearly average is about 2 hours a day. I have to refill our battery in 2 hours. From the other, if we get power throughout the day, the other 16, 17 hours where there's not sun, there are 2 hours of all the panels working correctly. So if it's super cloudy, I get like this much for this long. And if it equates to 2 solid sun hours, like that's our daily average. You just need more panels. But I would need 5 times this many to properly heat the water we need on those days. On other days, I could boil a swimming pool.
It's not a perfect system.
No. Everything's a series of trade-offs. It's just how you want to set it up.
Yep.
But there's always some way. So there's that way. There is, people do thermal collection. There's thermal hot water heaters. But again, no sun. There's not a lot of hot water. And then it drops off. You don't have it in the evening when we like to shower before bed. We could change that. We could shower earlier.
Or you could simply boil water.
Yep.
And accept that. Like, do I love the hot shower? Yes. But in the instance of like great calamity,
here's a pitcher and a tank of warm water.
You adjust.
Yeah.
And it's not that bad. I think that some of it is just a mentality. Maybe all of this is a mentality.
Yep. A lot of it is, well, I couldn't live without the... Okay. Then spend a lot extra to make sure you have a triple redundancy on those things.
I didn't think I could live without hot water at the kitchen sink. And while it is still a pain, 2 years later, I can live without it.
Yeah.
You learn to work around things. You learn to adapt.
It is true. All right. Well, that is our take on resiliency in off-grid. I hope it was interesting. If there's comments, questions,
opinions, thoughts. Things.
Yeah, throw them in the comments. We respond to all the comments. If we don't, YouTube hasn't shown it to us. You darn guys, what is wrong with your thinger? Thinger broken. Sometimes, like days later, we're like, where do these come from? We check them like multiple times a day. we'll get to it when it shows up. Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you for the next one. Here's Mrs. Pig in her new area, tearing up the ground, which provides plenty of food for the little fresh chickens. Worms in every spot. Symbiotic relationship.